Yeah, thank you. If I'm saying I'm going to be on screen and I'm not on screen, or I'm supposed to be pointing something I'm not, I know there's going to be a few of you chiming in here shortly, coming online. So once that happens, feel free to let me know via text message, because sometimes I think I'm doing something and showing you something and I'm not, and you're just watching me show you stuff on the computer as opposed to watching what I'm doing on the computer. So let's see. And I still need to make sure this is right. Okay, I think this is good. Okay, so welcome to the semester. My name's Joel. Hopefully you guys have got going. Looks like pretty much everyone's on Sapling Learning, for better or worse, and if you aren't, you probably don't know about this, so you're not here. So like to start with a few little short things. First off, I know you guys read the syllabus. I know a lot of you are hard at work trying to get things done. I know there's been technical difficulties. Actually, compared to last semester, I'm kind of happy. I've only had so far 5 people with technical difficulties, which way better than over the summer. Is what it is. Still a learning process, but hopefully things get settled for you guys and things are a little easier. Let me see if I can add some light. Okay, so where should we start? Let's start with the website, and let me try to remember how to do this here. I want to go to screen share, so I'm going to share you guys a screen, and let's say we're going to go to not Google Hangouts, not week 1. Let's share the whole screen. So we're going to share. So I think, yes, we are. It looks like you can see that infinite mirage of crap, basically. So let's go over here. Let's go to the course website. And let me make sure we're on the course website very quickly. I should be able to check on this from my phone and see how we're doing. Boom, boom, boom. Okay. So I'm going to make sure that we're here. Okay, so first thing I'm doing, I'm going to take you to Sapling's website. We're just going to talk about some things. I think almost everyone's found what's happening so far. If you ever have a problem, feel free to call me. Feel free also to go to tech support, which is right over here. You guys can look at tech support off to the side. I'm going to be honest, I'm not always as happy with how quick they are or the answers, but it should be the place we go first just to make sure everything's kosher and we're doing what we should do. So is what it is. Oh, good. So I am able to watch right now and see that I am doing what I think I'm doing. So we're going to kind of chug along here. So you've got my contact info always at your fingertips. So there's 2 ways to use the website. One is right through the center here where my mouse cursor is. You can see that I could leave you little helpful directions. I'm probably not going to update this too often, but it'll have the syllabus. It'll have the link to the office hours forum, which you guys can look at. It'll also have a news forum link, so you guys can go see what's happening here. So there's 2 ways to use this. One is down the center, and you just scroll down and you can see everything I've allowed for you to see at this point, right? And so you guys can see that we're topic 1, intro definitions PPF. We've got chapters 1 and 2, not a big deal. You can see what homework I've released. There's also going to be 1 more problem set coming up related to this that I'm going to release today. And just as an FYI, I'm going to also be extending both the assignments today. I just want to get people motivated and started. But this will be the general format. You'll have the discussion about what's happening in the chapters that we're looking at. You'll have the reading from Microeconomics as a Second Language, which I know some of you are still waiting on that book. You're next going to have the readings from the Principles of Economics. Now, I heard from someone that they bought the book, and that's fine. In fact, probably I would buy the book if I could get a nice cheap used copy, because I prefer not to read something on screen. But if you're broke and you can't afford the first book and whatnot, you can feel free to just use this book, the Principles of Economics. the PDF for it is in your syllabus. Then I'm always going to have this little heads up on when the reader assignments are due. I'll also tell you down here when the reader assignments are due. And you can see they're due Sunday at 10 p.m. I might relax that to the middle of the week at some point this weekend. So you're always going to have study aids first. So initially, the first week or two, you're going to have this external video links folder, which if you click on it, just takes you to a page. And it's a bunch of websites from different economists. So you see a website. This is from MJM Foodie. I believe it's a he. He's an economist. You've got micro versus macro. It's a short little discussion, 1 minute. Positive versus normative economics, another short one. Same economist, by the way, MJM Foodie. Then you've got Introduction to Production Possibility Functions. With this is Jody Beggs from Economists Do It With Models. At 1 week, if I lose some weight, I'll put on her t-shirt and you guys can see what a hoot it is. This to help you think about production possibility frontiers. Then we've got a video from Khan Academy, which some students like. And for the first 2 or 3 weeks, I'll be putting up these video links for you guys so that you guys can check them out. What I want you to do is be a little proactive. If you decide I like MJM Foodie's video the best, then you can go to their YouTube link at MJM Foodie, and you can follow it by watching it on YouTube. So we'll see what that looks like when I do this. Let me mute this. And so then what's going to happen is you've got MJM Foodie, and let's make sure we're good there. MJM Foodie is, you know, you can then go from MJM Foodie. Let's see, how do we do this on YouTube again? It's been a while. You can go down and see all of the videos for MJM Foodie. Click on the name, go to videos, and it's going to show you all of the videos that MJM Foodie has up. Now, some of those videos will be helpful for the class, other ones won't. All of them, you can see, have a discussion about what they're on. So, dead weight loss from monopoly, collusion, right? Perfectly competitive factor markets, monosopony. So you can go through all of these videos, and MJM Foodie has quite a few videos actually at the end of the day. You can load a lot more and see which ones relate to what you're working on at that particular time. Okay. So if we go back, if you decide you like Economists Do It With Models, you can do the same thing for Jody's. You could also go to her website, and her website's very orderly in terms of what she has posted and what you can learn. And the same thing for Khan Academy. You can go to Khan Academy's website. The goal with putting all of these videos up is to just give you a different perspective from mine or from the textbooks on what you're learning in class and a different approach. And as I said, all of you will learn slowly over time whose videos you like. Use those videos. As I said, after the first couple weeks of material, it's going to be up to you to figure out who you like and then go find their videos on your own. It's not a big, hard process, so is what it is. So then next up, we're going to have the PPF simplified. You know, I don't know how I feel about these, but I've put up these PowerPoints. In my class that I teach face-to-face, I tend not to use PowerPoints. If I use them, I tend to use them towards the end of the semester when I'm running out of time. So when you're looking at these PowerPoints, you can take them with a grain of salt. It's not something I normally use. So you guys use the PowerPoints how you see fit. For this particular topic and for the next few topics, I have little worksheets. If you click on the worksheets link, it takes you to all of them. You'll notice if you open these, there is no answer key. On the worksheets, it's going to vary by time, but what I found is the worksheets are a good way to study for the exam. Try to get yourself ready and prep to make sure you know what you're doing. So the worksheets are there. Once you're done with them, at least on these first ones, I'm going to do it on the honor system. You tell me you're done, and I'll send you a link to them, and you can download the answer sheets. The other option that you have, if you feel like you might not have gotten the right answers and you're uncertain, is you could send me a scanned copy of your worksheet. So just take a picture with your smartphone and then send me a picture of the worksheet, and I'll give you a thumbs up or thumbs down and say, hey, this is a good job, or hey, you didn't do quite that good on this one. And then we can work on it together until you get it right, and then you'll have your own answer key because you created it. So you always have the study aids. and they are what they are. If you guys want more, you can ask for more. Try to get me to put anything up there. The other thing with the study aids, I have something I might be putting up. It's kind of in rudimentary form that I've been working on over time, but we'll see whether I can get that up for you guys. The next thing is the problem sets. Normally, this is a slightly accelerated class, so we're moving about 50%. You know, the class is half the time, so it's about double speed. So normally every week there's going to be about 2 problem sets with 40 problems between both of them. Some weeks more, some weeks less. This week will definitely be less. This week and a half, 2-week period will definitely be less. And those will be up there by topic. Then we have the reader assignments, and the reader assignments, you can click through them from here, and you can see what you need to do. So you scroll down, you've got all of the reader assignments. You can go to post replies, click on it, and now you have what people have replied. When you look at it, you're not going to see anything until you reply, and that's the way I have it set up on purpose. So this is one way to use the website, just going right through the center of the column and looking for the highlighted section. As we add more material, it gets longer and longer, so I'm not going to remove material after I start. The other way to use the website is you can just click on activities and due dates, and it'll take you to the activities and due dates. And that's a quick way to tell when something's due, whether you're going to be running late or not. Then you can go to forums. Click on the forums link, and you can find, you know, the office hours forum. That's where you can ask questions. So I've got introductions thread that 16 of you have replied to. So we'll see how that is. Problem with loading activities. We've got a few people here. Someone asked a question. Some other people chimed in saying they were having problems with the website as well. I am aware of these problems. It's I'm trying to do the best I can at this point. Obviously, it's not ideal. So someday soon I need to create my own one, create my own website. So general news and announcements. You've got my welcome message, and you'll have all of my announcements every week. This will just get crowded towards the end because every week I'll post the new link for the office hours so that you guys can come see me or whatnot. And as I've said before, after this is done, I'll be dropping the office hours onto the course website as well so that you can watch them in the website. The learning forums, right now there's just 2 reading assignments. As a generality, most weeks you're going to have 1 to 2 reading assignments for the week. They'll be very similar to this one, short and sweet. I do want to add this caveat that you open up the assignment and it has 3 questions. The 3 questions are really minimal. You can expand upon these. In fact, I encourage you to expand on them. If you're just answering your reader assignments with 3 to 6 questions, you're not doing a good job. Your goal should be not to, so if you're writing 3 to 6 sentences, it's too short, you'll probably get a 0 and fail. If you're writing a 4-page response, I'm probably not going to be happy either because I honestly don't have time to grade 4 pages of assignments. A good way to think about this is if you can do this and respond in 2 paragraphs, then you're pretty good. So when you go to post replies, you do have the option of appending an answer, so you can upload a document. Later on in the semester, some of the questions will ask you for a graph. So you have 2 options. One is to upload a picture of a graph. The other is to describe the graph in your answer. I'm fine with either one, but if it asks you to do something, feel certain that you should be addressing what the question asks you. But as I said, the questions are a minimum. If you feel like there's something more you'd like to discuss, go right ahead and discuss whatever you feel like, okay? So this is the website in a nutshell. And then you go down, resources. You could use that if you wanted a shortcut to get to any of the newspaper articles that might get uploaded later in the semester or anything else. Let's see, is there anything there right now? Yeah, you've got all of the things you've had access to, the external video links and the worksheets and PowerPoint. Finally, you've got your ability to look at your grades. So the grades are not finalized till the end of the semester, just an FYI. So what's going to happen with the grades is sometimes you're going to look at that and you're going to say, oh, my grade in my problem sets, my homework looks really crappy. Well, the reality is the homework grade gets scaled up, as I said in the syllabus. Well, did I say it in syllabus? Anyway, the way the homework grade gets calculated, it's not based on perfection. In fact, I don't expect you guys to perfectly do the homework. I expect you guys to use the homework to study with. So your grades and homework at the end of the semester, at least in past semesters, somewhere around an 80 or above has been an A. Between a 60 and an 80 has been a B. 40 to 60% correct is C, and then anything below that's been an F. I don't give D's in the problem set section. So it's not meant to be perfect. In fact, you'll find when you do the homework, some of the homeworks, you know, try as you might not get it correct because of the way the problems are. But do your best. You can always call me and ask for questions. You can always ask for an extension. You can also always just take the 0 on an assignment. In fact, some of the assignments, they don't give partial credit. I would recommend, if, you know, depending on the length of the particular homework problem you're working on, anything more than 10 to 15 minutes, unless the problem requires a lot of calculations, worth of your study time is wasted. So there's a couple different classes of questions that you guys have seen so far and will see in the future. One is a sorting exercise where you have, you know, 10 terms and you sort those 10 terms or items into 3 bins. Well, the way the homework system works, if one of those is wrong, you don't get credit for anything, and it doesn't tell you what's wrong. What I've found in the past is the first or second try, most students do best on those 2 tries. If you try to do it 35 times and you're still not getting the right answer, at that point you're just guessing and you really don't know the answer and you're confusing yourself more often than not. So you've got 2 options. One is contact me and we can walk you through on where it belongs and why it belongs there. Or you can just say, I'll take the 0. In fact, most of those questions, it doesn't look like it till you submit it, but you actually do get partial credit. So you can take the partial credit or even a 0 and say, you know what, did the best I could, I'm moving on. If you're not doing that with every problem, you're going to be okay. And also as well, some of the problems are a little harder to analyze and make sense of what the website wants. If that's the case, call me, and I probably have a quick trick for you. You're not meant to be, you know, spending countless hours on the email or on the problem sets. You're really meant to be using that time to, you know, learn and engage with the material and actually understand it. When exams happen, they're going to show up underneath this section. The exams also, just to give you an idea, they are not, the computer grades them, but the computer doesn't always do a good job. I go through all of the exams and hand grade them as well to make certain that you're getting all of the points you should be getting. So once the first exam happens, we can talk a little more about that. But as I said, the final grades aren't finalized until the end of the semester, mainly because I don't trust the way the computer grades, and also because I like to scale things to what I'm seeing happening in the course. The other 2 sections you guys can explore on your own. So that's that. There was one question from, I'm blanking on her name. I think it was, let's go see. Okay, Boren Sock. And she had a question regarding the homework on graphs and economics. And I believe it was calculating the slope of the line. So I think it was problem, at least on mine, number 9, which they don't show you. I'm not going to go show you that because, well, as you can see, I got 100 on it. But, but just a quick little refresher in calculating the slope of a line. Let's go over to the drawing utility. And let's see whether I can make this a little larger. Okay, so I'm going to create a little graph here. Okay, so we've got this line, and let's just put some info here. Let's say that at a point up here, we are at what do we want to choose? 3 and 10. Okay, and we're going to say that that is point. And we'll make that point right here. Sure, why not? Wow, that did not look like what I thought it'd look like, but whatever. So let's see. So where it intersects the line, that was stupid. But anyway, we've got that. And let's say down here we've got, let's make this fun. It's going to be, that's 3 and 10. Well, first off, let's just go ahead and label this. Let's have fun. So this, let's make a supply and demand. So that's going to be price. This is going to be quantity. Okay, let's make sure these numbers make sense that we put here. So it should really be something a little different here. Let's make this, and I'm trying to do this off the top of my head, but this is going to be a price of $10. Okay, and quantity of 3. Okay. So this is a little bit backwards, and this is one of the things some people criticize economics before, because you guys are used to seeing these equations of this form, x, y. And so if we flip it around and we do it on the x and the y, then what we can talk about is that the y in this one, or our quantity, is going, or our x is going to be the price, so our x is going to be that $10, sorry, and the y will be the 3 quantity that I created. Then we've got another one here. Okay. Oh, okay. And here we've got, let's say, play around and say that this is $3 and this is quantity of 10. Make our lives fun. Okay. So how are we going to do this? So if we remember from math to calculate the slope of a line, the slope m is going to be equal to y1 minus y2. And let's go back here. All of this is divided by x1 minus x2. Okay? So if we plug in some of these problems, as long as we're consistent, it doesn't make a difference which way we choose. So we can say, let's do let's start with 3 minus 10 divided by, and what did we do? 10 minus 3. And obviously my slope's not drawn well, but that's equivalent to saying 7 divided by, and that's going to be, sorry, negative 7. Some of you should have caught that. Negative 7 divided by 7, which is equivalent to saying negative 1. Okay, so we have a slope that's downward sloping and a slope of -1, which is what we would expect to have with a symmetric response like that. So that's how you can solve these problems. Just go back to the point slope formula. If you have any problems with that, you can Google it and it'll tell you how to do it. So not a big deal. So let me put back this thing before I forget. So we need a text box here that says together for something we're going to do in a little bit here. Okay? So we can go back to our discussion. Let's go back to stop sharing, and we can go here. Okay, I think I am stopped sharing, and so we should be doing what we're doing. Okay, so anyway, hopefully that addresses your concerns or your questions and whatnot, and you guys can see what's happening. Let me, apparently my phone's getting a little laggy on loading this. Hopefully you guys, okay. So anyway, okay. And so I see boron's on here. Boron, the problem is the problems aren't exactly the same. So if we have the name of the problem on sapling, we can go ahead and do it. And feel free to just email me with particular questions as well. I can respond to that very quick as well. So just a few little high points first off. You guys are studying economics. Your book doesn't actually define what economics is, for better or worse. So we can offer a quick definition. Economics is the study of how individuals and societies allocate scarce resources given unlimited wants. Right? So we'll amplify some of that now. Let me find my handy eraser. I went out yesterday and I bought a Wacom tablet so that I could draw on the screen and just do things in the drawing program, and came to work today and totally forgot to bring the IR transponder to actually hook the stupid thing up. So we're stuck with my old school whiteboard here, so we'll use that for a second here. But as I said, if we want to talk about the definition of economics itself, econ is the study of how individuals in society and societies allocate scarce resources given unlimited wants. Okay? So the thing to focus on in this definition is scarcity, right? So what is scarcity going to be? So hopefully everyone can see this. So what is scarcity? So I like to throw it out there this way. Scarcity, so I want you guys to think of this. Is there anything you can buy, sell, or trade in the world that isn't scarce, right? So are there any items out there that are economically viable that, you know, you can't that you have in unlimited quantities? I think if you're serious about answering that question, what you're going to find is you can throw a lot of things out there, but you're going to find that everything is scarce, right? There's nothing that isn't scarce. So if everything is scarce and every problem and anything you want to buy, sell, or trade is scarce, what does that mean for the world? What's that mean for pricing? So if we take a step back, what that means for pricing is that let's imagine if everything wasn't scarce, if you had unlimited quantities of everything you were interested in, what would the price of those items be? And the price of those items would be fairly free, right? In fact, those items would be completely free. So scarcity entails that if everything is free, if everything is scarce, then there's going to be price. Now, are all things equally scarce? That's also not true, right? We also know that things aren't equally scarce. If we look at sands on the beach, there's a heck of a lot of that. If we look at something like, well, not gold, that's a bad example. Let's choose something a little more scarce than that. 1977 Pioneer SX 1280 stereo receivers. Those are items that are very, how shall we say this, scarce, right? So there's not a lot of those stereo receivers yet. It's been a long time since they've been produced, and if you want to buy one, good luck, right? So if everything's scarce, then that means we have a choice, right? We have to make decisions about how much we're going to buy and what quantities we're going to buy. And so scarcity is important to the idea of what economics is, because if people can't get everything they want, then they have to make a choice about it. And then the other side of that is we define everyone as having unlimited wants. So I want to give a little caveat to studying microeconomics at this point. The way to study microeconomics is first off to understand a little bit of its history, and that's outside of your textbook. It's something that we can really chat through, or you guys could give a phone call. But the way to think about this is economics is considered to be founded by Adam Smith in the 1700s when he wrote a book called The Inquiry into the Nature and Causes of the Wealth of Nations. That's a book that, if you think about it, sounds like it's a very macro view, right? We're going to discuss why some nations are rich and other nations are poor. That's big picture. But if you read his book, what you end up finding is that most of his work is focused on what is in modern times considered micro issues. But I do want to add this little cautionary tale. I've got a textbook at home from 1904, a fairly well-known economics textbook. And in that textbook, there's no mention of micro or macroeconomics. In fact, macroeconomics and microeconomics weren't created as disciplines. Really, the discussion didn't happen about splitting until the 1930s to 1950s. So this is a very modern innovation. So if we go back into time to what Adam Smith is describing, and a little bit later, David Ricardo, who also created a lot of the models you're going to learn in the first half of this semester, what they were creating were models that were very simple models, right? So we've got a, how should we say this? They were creating a model that addressed what they saw in the world they lived in. And David Ricardo really is active from 1820s to 1860, maybe 1880. I'd need to look up his dates again. So I want you to think about how the world, how the economy is different now than it was in the 1800s and in the 1700s. In the 17 and 1800s, most individuals were subsistence farmers. If we want to talk about the 99% versus the 1%, most people were engaged in the process of trying to live. They were manufacturing goods so that they could survive, and then they would hopefully have a good crop so that they could sell off the excess supply to buy other things that they might want. If you can understand that world, then it helps make understanding economics easier. If you're talking about people who live in a world where almost everyone's living at subsistence agriculture or slightly above, then what we're really looking at is a world where everything is scarce. And people have unlimited wants to define those. I think some of these constraints are a little hard in the modern world, especially for someone who lives in an advanced Western economy, because, you know, I'm not super wealthy, but I'm wealthy enough that I know that I can afford all the apples I want. So if I go to the store to buy apples like I do every week, I'm going to buy pretty much the same exact amount of apples every week, regardless of price. If apples are cheaper, economic theory and your textbook says I should buy more. But I already said I'm buying all of the apples I want. The only way I want more is if I feel motivated to make some apple pie filling and can it that weekend. But in a normal week, I know I'm time constrained. So even if apples are dirt cheap, I'm not going to buy them and save them because I know they'll go bad before I consume them. I'm already consuming all the apples I want. And this is probably true for a lot of agricultural and food commodities in the U.S., since some of the latest studies have shown that 30 to 50% of all food purchased in the United States ends up in a garbage can. That means most of us are purchasing actually more food than we need, and we're dumping the rest. Very inefficient and non-economical. The other side of the coin says that if the price of the apples goes up, I should buy less. But I'm going to be honest, in terms of my overall total income, if the price of apples goes up, I have very little motivation to decrease my purchasing. And that's because if we look at the relevant range of which apples would go up in price, it's very unlikely they'd go up high enough to motivate me to cut my consumption. I would have to imagine seeing apples go to, you know, $8 to $10 a pound before I'd want to cut back on consumption personally, and, you know, is what it is. So the world they're describing is a world we no longer live in. We live in a world where a lot more people are able to live like kings in prior time periods, where people weren't constrained by incomes and budget constraints weren't meaningful, where people didn't feel the scarcity of goods because, you know, we live in a modern world where you can go to a grocery store and buy virtually anything you want without shortages. Economics was created in a world where shortages were abundant, and it quite frequently, especially if you lived in rural areas or in frontier regions, you would go store and they'd be sold out of half the items. And so scarcity is less of a constraint on us now than it might have been in the past, but it still does operate and it still does work in our lives. The next thing that's important to understand is that you know, we might be more filled by satiation, right? So we might get sated with what our consumption is. You know, the next point about the difference between the past and now, if you think about it, is advertising, marketing, and branding are very recent innovations in business. If you go back to the early 1800s, late 1700s, there was no brand identity for the most part. People bought crackers. They didn't buy Keebler Elf crackers. They didn't buy Nabisco, Townhouse, Ritz, right? People just wanted crackers. You went to the store, you said, "Shopkeeper, I'd like some crackers." And what did they give you? A bag of crackers. Did they ask you what type? Very unlikely unless you lived in an urban population and you had some money. And so advertising and branding that we see is a modern innovation. If you can put yourself in the mindset of someone living in the past, it'll make studying economics for the first month a lot easier. It'll make it more realistic. It'll help you understand why the theory looks the way it does, because it's describing a simpler economy in a simpler world. So I just want to put that out there, okay? So next things next, I know we've had some questions, and you know, macroecon, positive normative economics, what an economic model is, all of those things are fairly easy topics. There's a lot of good videos online, so I don't want to waste your or my time going over them unless you have specific questions. But I know the questions that people have, even after they've watched the videos, is on what's absolute advantage, what's comparative advantage, what's the distinction. And so that's what I'm going to talk about for the next 20 minutes or so. And then we'll probably end a little early today unless someone emails me an extra question, because I think I'll have addressed all the questions by that point. But the hardest thing we're going to discuss for the first 2 weeks of class really is this notion of trade. And I just want to give you guys a little example. First off, a little bit about my teaching methodology. I don't expect you to know everything. I don't expect you to know everything on an exam. I don't expect you to know everything in the homework. I expect you to study and learn and try to grow and do better. For some of you, that'll be frustrating, because since I don't expect you to know everything, I don't expect exams to be perfect. I design exams for the most part knowing that some people will not get all of the questions right, and in all honesty, I'm fine with that. So what I want you guys to do is really focus on learning as much as you can in such a short amount of time. I'm going to be honest, opportunity cost is one of the most difficult things to think about in economics, but also one of the simplest and one of the most universal. So if we go back to that definition of economics and talk about scarcity, because things are scarce, it means we have to make decisions and we have to make choices. So I want you guys to think about it this way. Every choice you make in life, and really economics nowadays discusses everything, not just the things you think about as being economic, not money related. There's economists who specialize in happiness and religion and things. So in the real world, you operate on making decisions. And most of your decisions have more than one outcome, right? So you had a choice today whether you were going to show up and watch the video now or wait until later and watch it, and most of you made the decision based on the number of viewers to watch it later, and based on past experience, I know many of you will be watching this later. So you have decision 1, decision 2, decision 3. Now let's just think, if you're going to the store and you're thinking about buying apples, oranges, or grapes, that's a fairly simple decision. If you're thinking about, am I going to go to class and watch the video now, watch it later, or watch it now, watch it later, or watch it never? And let's just go with that. Now, later. And the people who will never see this, never. Okay, so we've got 3 different decisions you could have made in regards to this video. We know that for 2 people, they determined that they wanted to be here now. And in economics, we like to say that people are rational, they make informed decisions, and the reason they can do that is because they have consistent decision sets. So we say that the 2 or 3 people who are watching now determine that D1 is greater than decision 2, which is greater than decision 3. And we're going to assume this is always true. So the question then is, what is opportunity cost? Opportunity cost isn't the decision you make now, because that's the correct decision. Opportunity cost is what you gave up to do this, right? Sorry, what you gave up. What's a better way to think about this? There's a reason that you did this later, and so, or you might have wanted to do this later, so it's what you gave up to do it now instead of later. And that's a little difficult because this is an intangible question. So when we look at your opportunity cost of decision, when I'm talking to my students who come to my face-to-face class, I go, look, the opportunity cost is the second best decision. So I tell my face-to-face students, I say, look, you guys showed up at class today. That means you're making the best decision for you. But you could have not shown up and done something else. What's the other thing you would have done? And more often than not, I get sleep, play video games, hang out with my friends. Well, I want you guys to think, is that a high or a low opportunity cost? I normally say unless you work third shift, it's a low opportunity cost or you're sleep constrained. But playing video games, low opportunity cost. Come to class, much better for you. Because video games, suck. That's my bias. So it's easy to determine the opportunity cost of going to class. It's what you could have done. But if you could have gone to work and made $40 an hour, then you gave up $40 coming to class. That's a pretty high opportunity cost, is what I like to say. So the second best thing you could have done was taking that high opportunity cost shot, right? $40 an hour. So your opportunity cost of going to class would have been $40. Everything has an opportunity cost. The problem is, the more important the decision you're making, to be clear what your opportunity cost is, unfortunately. So how can I put this more bluntly? A lot of times, your opportunity cost of taking a job is that maybe you have 2 or 3 job offers. It might not be clear to you which of those job offers is the best one for you to take. In fact, a lot of decisions, the more important the decision, you're only going to know after you make the decision whether it was the best choice. That's true for what job to take. That's true for what stock to invest in. That's true for where to go for vacation, for example, even. You don't know till you do it that you chose to go on vacation in Hawaii like one of my son's friends over the week that you ended up with 2 hurricanes and tropical storms hitting the island plus an earthquake, right? So obviously a bad week to have traveled. You never could have known ahead of time, and if you did know ahead of time, you probably wouldn't have made the choice to go Hawaii. So I like to think that opportunity cost is important to understand, not because it gives us exact answers, but because it gives us an indication of the future, right? Of what it gives us an indication, or makes us remember that every choice we make has an alternative. And to the extent that we can quantify that alternative, we should, to determine what's right for us to do. So that's first up, that's opportunity cost. So if things have an opportunity cost and we're making choices, then we can talk about those choices. When we study the production possibility model, what we're really doing is we're talking about a model that simplifies the world and says, look, we have 2 choices. We can do 2 things. And in the production possibility model, we're going to start with this notion of resources. And the idea of resources is that we produce things with resources. So what are our resources? Well, if we're talking about a production model, it's all the things we need to produce something. In economics, we have kind of 3 uber categories of production. We have first, land, okay, or natural capital, or natural resources. Okay, so we can think about oil, gold, silver, iron ore, bauxite, all the things that we need to make things, and the land to house our production facilities on. All of those are natural resources or land. The second type of basic uber category of resources is going to be labor. And labor falls into 2 categories. One is the one you guys are used to, people work. Okay? And labor is exclusively the domain of humans, for better or worse. So if we're talking about animal labor, we could put them under natural resources, or under the next category we'll talk about in a second. The other category of labor that's less intuitive is that labor also includes the skills people have and are learning. Another word for this, more technical word, is human capital. Okay, so people make decisions about human capital. That normally refers to education, but it could also be on-the-job training. Learning how to do your job better, right, is human capital. And the third big category is capital. And in some textbooks, they refer to this as natural capital. This is human capital. All labor is human capital. Then they say there's financial capital and equipment capital. But I like to think about capital as money and the things money buys. Very self-explanatory. And all of these are David Ricardo's original resources. Really, it's his model. So if we want to put this in time perspective, it's going to be the 1860s through to the 80s, I believe. Don't quote me on that, but it's somewhere in that mid-1800 ballpark. Okay, lastly, we have two modern innovations. One is technology. So technology takes two forms. A lot of you probably haven't thought about technology, and this is really the 1930s where this is added to the economic model. But a lot of you haven't thought about technology, but technology can be good or bad, but we're only talking about good technological change. So these are improvements in capital, right? But once they happen, they become the new thing. So it's making machinery better. So making better things. Or in a business sense, making better processes, right? Making better things or making better processes. Okay. So that's what we're talking about here when we're looking at technology. In the 1990s and 2000s, after I went to school, so I'm less versed in doing this, we talked about entrepreneurial activity, but I've been reading about this. It really seems like we're actually talking about risk and the ability for people to take risks. Now, I'm going to be honest, this isn't a part of our primary model, so we're less concerned with it. Okay? So those are our resources: land, labor, capital, technology, and risk. And they're uber categories, and they can contain everything we need. Those major categories, 5 items, can be everything we need to produce anything. So when we move to production, we want to say that production is output, which Y is how we define output in economics. Okay, so Y equals output. So output, and I want you to imagine you have a business, and that business is selling tacos out of a taco truck since it's lunchtime. You use beef, tortillas, tomatoes, radishes, lime, lemon, onion, cilantro. Now I'm really hungry. Anyway, you guys get the picture. You also use humans. You use a truck or a restaurant. You use a griddle. You have space to produce it on. You took the risk to start the business. If you had data from a bunch of days of work, you would theoretically be able to create a mathematical model that said, if I have this much taco meat and all the other supplies, this is the maximum amount of tacos I can make. And the way we talk about this is, we call this the production function. Production function. Fn is just function. Okay? So that's our production function. And we're saying that output Y is equal to some function that's just an italicized F that's composed of land, labor, capital, and I'm not going to model risk because risk is something that's too mathematically complex for an introductory class to analyze. But the way we think about risk is it's either on or off. So too much risk, bad thing, right? Too little risk, bad thing, right? Too much risk, you might blow up your economy and everyone dies of starvation. Too little risk, you're never growing and expanding. All you're doing is keeping alive at a subsistence level. So there's a right amount of risk. We don't want to discuss what the right amount is in an intro class, but the other side is risk also has an element of randomness, right? Sometimes crap happens. Nassim Taleb, who's a famous mathematician and financial trader, says, wrote a book called Black Swan, right? And the idea is about improbable things that do happen. And so risk is very difficult to quantify, very difficult to even think about theoretically beyond the scope of the class. But we do have technology, which we're using the Greek symbol alpha for. So all this is saying is that we know there exists some theoretic relationship between land, labor, capital, and technology that gives us a certain level of output. we're not going to discuss what the math would look like because it would vary based on the business, right? So if we maximize output, what do you think happens to our land, labor, capital, and technology? What have we just done? Well, we basically said we're going to maximize our use of labor to make tacos. We're going to maximize our use of land, since I did it backwards. Maximize capital. Maximize technology. Okay? If we maximize all of our labor and land and capital and technology to make tacos, if this is what we're making is tacos, and our stand could have made tacos or they could have made donuts. I know, a little absurd, but anyway. Well, if you're maximizing tacos, what happens to the output of donuts? 0, because you have no land going to tacos, no labor going to tacos, no capital going to tacos, no technology going to tacos, and in fact, the output would be 0, and here the output would be max. It's an either-or proposition. Now I want you to imagine what would happen if you said, you know what, we don't need to maximize tacos anymore. Let's just divert 10% of our land, labor, capital, and technology away from tacos. Well, what would happen as you divert? Your output of tacos would go down as you divert resources, and that would imply you're putting them to donuts, so what's going to happen to your donut output? Your donut output's going to go up. And I know this is a hard model to wrap your head around. It's really, a lot of this technical stuff is, oh yeah, it's in the macroeconomics textbook, so don't worry about it. It's actually in Principles of Economics as well. I'll find the page numbers for you guys if you're interested. Just send me an email. But this is a difficult model to say the least, right? It's not simple, but it has some simple results. So if we put this in graphical form with these production functions, then you have two choices: tacos or donuts. And we said if you put all of your resources towards making tacos, then you have some theoretical maximum amount of tacos you can make. If you put all of your resources towards donuts, you have some theoretic maximum amount of donuts you can make. Okay? Let's assume that the trade-off is 1 for 1. So for every taco you give up, you get one more donut. So if you give up half of your tacos, you get 50% more donuts. And if we connect the dots, this is a straight line. What we've assumed here is something called homogeneous preferences or homogeneous preferences. The idea is that the items that you use to make one item are directly transferable to the other. Now we know that's absurd for tacos and donuts, but imagine you have a factory that makes short sleeve shirts and long sleeve shirts. Well, obviously, to make long sleeve shirts, you need the same equipment, the same supplies, just a little bit more material. And so there is some direct relationship. And I think the PowerPoint does an okay job of distinguishing between homogeneous and heterogeneous inputs. But maybe I'll discuss that on a future video, because right now I need to finish up because my kid's got kindergarten. Well, he gets to meet his kindergarten teacher today, so I want to finish up in the next 10 minutes or so. And there's some other things I think are more important for you to understand from a technical side. So when we have a production function, it can look like that, homogeneous, or it can be bowed out like this, which means heterogeneous. And it's related to the inputs that we have, heterogeneous, and then this one is homogeneous. Homogeneous just means same, hetero just means different. So the way to think about this is anywhere on the line, you are what's called efficient. So if this is A, this is B, this is point C, then A, B, and point C are all what economists call efficient, which just means waste is minimized in the system. If you're inside the graph, we know that you could produce more tacos with your resources, you could produce more donuts, or anything in between, and so we call this point W inefficient, or if this helps you out, wasteful. Okay, inefficient or wasteful. Likewise, you'll see this on the PowerPoint in your book. Point F, you can't get to here today, so it's not possible. But in the future, you might be able to get there through economic growth, right? But for now, we're not going to go with that story. Okay, so this is the story of production possibilities frontiers, which falls out of our story of resources and scarcity, right? Because things are scarce, we make choices. The opportunity cost of our choice is what we could have done. If we limit our world to just two choices, then we've got a simple production possibility model which says, given two choices, we can do one or the other, so we can do all of one thing, all of another, or something in between, right? So when we talk about absolute advantage and comparative advantage, what we're really doing is we're looking at the math and the graphs behind opportunity cost. So if a producer has an absolute advantage in the production of an item, then what we're really saying is that that producer, and let me put up a new screen for you. Let's do this. And I'm going to screen share the whole screen. Let me know if this doesn't work again, because it's looking like it's working on my end. And I want to go to this Excel graph. So I've got a simple model, simpler than the ones you guys are seeing. And I'll do a little harder one next week, or maybe later today or this weekend. But this is a simple model. We've got Jack and Jill, right? Jack and Jill went up a hill, fetch a pail of water. Okay, so in this model, there's fish and there's fruit. Jack and Jill can go hunting for fish or they can capture fruit. Okay. Sorry, trying to make sure that you guys are seeing what I'm seeing. So I'm reloading YouTube here, which is fun. Okay, start my YouTube, and let's see. So we've got fish and we've got fruit. What this graph is saying is that if Jack hunts for fish and doesn't get any fruit, he can get 15 fish, which means 0 fruit, or he can get 5 fruit and 0 fish. And I'm exemplifying this right here by saying if Jack only fishes, he gets 15 fish and 0 fruit. If Jack only gathers fruit, he gets 0 fish and 5 fruit. This chart right here is just blowing up. These two graphs are just blowing, or tables are just blowing up what's happening right here. Okay. Jill, on the other hand, is exactly the opposite, and this is a very gendered example. Sorry about that. But Jill, on the other hand, she's really good at gathering fruit, but she sucks at getting fish, right? So the question is, who's the best person to go fishing? Well, we can clearly see that Jack is our best fisher. Jack gets 15 fish. Jill, on the other hand, gets 5 fish. Jack gets 5 fruit. Jill gets 15 pounds of fruit, for example. So if we want to say who's the best gatherer of fruit, that's going to be our friend Jill. So absolute advantage means that given resources that you have, you're best at producing what? And so in the case of Jack, we say Jack has an absolute advantage in fishing. Likewise, Jill has an absolute advantage in gathering fruit. Okay. And let's give this a little more space so that you guys can see it all. Okay, so what's that mean? That means that if they specialize and do what they're good at, right? The story of absolute advantages, look, different people have different absolute advantages. This is an easy example. They have different ones. So if they work together, just intuitively, what should they each do? Well, obviously, Jack should go fishing and Jill should gather fruit. And if that's the case, we're going to end up in this scenario right here. Jill gets fruit, Jack goes fishing. And if we wanted to put it down, then we say Jack, and let's do it again, Jill, and we say what they're going to do. And so Jack is going to get 15 fish, Jill's going to get 15 fruit. Now we can also go over here and graph their production possibility frontiers. So if we want to do that, then what we can do is we can create a line where we say, and let's do for all of these graphs, fish, fruit. And that'll be true for all of them because I don't want to duplicate it. So the vertical will always be fish, the horizontal fruit. So if that's true, then Jill doesn't get a lot of fish if she does her max, but her production possibility frontier looks like she gets a lot of fruit. Likewise for Jack, Jack gets a lot of fish, but not a lot of fruit. Okay, so they've got almost exactly inverse of each other production possibility frontiers, and these are their PPFs. So just a little review. If they're producing on the line, are they efficient, inefficient, or not feasible? Boing, 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 it's efficient, right? If they're inside the line, if Jill was producing where my cross is right now, she would be efficient, inefficient, or not feasible? Inefficient. And if she's out here in La La Land, can she even get there? No. So the question is, if they work together, what are they going to do? Well, the argument is Jack is going to go fishing, and Jill is going to get fruit, and they'll end up with 15-15, which if we superimpose these other graphs on there, wonder if I can change the color of this graph, but anyway, I'm not sure how to do that. Oh, good. So that's Jack. That's Jill. And so what we can see is clearly Jack and Jill do better working together than working apart, right? So let's say that they decide to split equally. What would they get? Well, if Jack gave up half her fruit, or if Jack gave up half his fish and Jill gave up half her fruit, they would each get 7.5 of each. So the question is, could Jill get 7.5 fruit and 2.5 fish? And 7.5 fish? Not at all, right? So that would be somewhere up here for Jill. Could Jack get 7.5 fish and 7.5 fruit? Not at all. That would be somewhere over here for Jack. So together they get to consume out here at 7.5 each, or oh, well, maybe I did that wrong. So let's see, 7.5 each is going to be 3.5, 3.75 per person. And could they do that? 3.75 and 3.75, and they could not, right? And so maybe I'd need to draw better graphs to kind of exemplify it, but I can leave that to you guys. There's a lot of examples online for this. So let's go back here and let's talk about calculating these things. So if we want to, and let's set about here, add rows. How do I add rows? Insert, cancel. Whatever. Okay. Not going to think about it today. So let's see. So let's just go back here, and I'm going to delete all this because I'm being lazy. So if we want to think about this original problem, what's the cost of items in terms of another? So let's think for Jack. So in the case of Jack, one piece of fruit, how do I spell piece? I'm spelling it wrong. Yeah, that didn't work. Okay, I'm blanking on piece today, guys. So one item of fruit costs how much fish? So 5 goes into 15 how many times? 3. So for every 1 pound of fruit that Jack collects, he gives up 3 pounds of fruit. So the cost is 3, or another way of putting it would be it's -3. Okay. So 1 fruit is equal to -3 fish. Okay. For Jack, the converse is that for 1 item of fish, he gives up the inverse. And the inverse of this is 1/3 of a pound of fruit. This is an easy one. Likewise for Jill, the situation is exactly opposite. In fact, I'm just going to put it over here. This is Jill's numbers for this one. Well, we can write it out. 1 piece of fish for Jill. Costs 3 pounds of fruit. And likewise for Jill, 1 item of fruit costs 1/3 pound of fish. One way of thinking about these are barter prices for the items for each individual, right? So each individual wants to go shopping and they're going to buy something. This is what it costs them. So if Jill wants to get 1 pound of fish, it's going to cost her 3 fruits. Okay, so this is the ratio. We call this normalization, setting things to 1. Now there's another way we could have solved that, and that's just by setting up the ratios. And I like to say, look, we've got 15 for Jack, and in fact we've got 15 fish, and we've got that over 5 fruit. So we could set up the ratio, right? And we could say, geez, of course I'm going to do that wrong. Okay. So we could set up the ratio, and the ratio then says, well, now we want to say for every 1 fish equals how much fruit? X fruit. And you can do this by solving for the ratio. So you cross multiply 5 times 1, so it's 5 divided by 15. Cross multiply and divide, 5 divided by 15, which equals 1/3. And that's what we got here. For 1 fish, he gives up 1/3 pound of fruit. So what that means is X fruit is equal or equivalent to saying 1/3 pound of fruit. So that's one other method of calculating this if you don't want to do it brute force. You can always check by just establishing the ratio. But what you're remembering is this is 15, and to get 5, you give up all 15. Right? If you have a more detailed graph the way you do in some of the problems, then you have to figure out what you give up to get from one end to the other. So either choose the extremes or the middle. And that's what I'm going to do later on next week, is I'll show you what that graph looks like. So anyway, let me check real quick, make sure I don't have any emails from you guys. And I think I've addressed all of the questions, although hopefully this is enough to get you stimulated so that you can... So hopefully this is enough, I think I'm back, to get you stimulated so that you can answer the comparative advantage questions. Although let me screen share this really quick, because I think what you need to see is, once again, these are the prices, right? So for Jill, if she's going to buy fish, she wants to pay less than 3 pounds of fruit, because she's saying, look, I can do 3 pounds of fruit, right? On my own, if I go and hunt for 1 pound of fish, I give up 3 pounds of fruit. So I'd like to give up less than that, not more, right? And so Jill's happy with prices less than 3 pounds of fruit for 1 pound of fish. Jack, on the other hand, says for 1 item of fish, I'd like it to be, it costs me 3 fish, so I'd like to get, or let's go to this one. For Jack, he says for 1 pound of fish, I give up 1/3 pound of fruit. I'd like to get more than that, right? If I'm going to sell fish, I want to get more than I could have gotten on my own. So the price of fish in terms of fruit should be somewhere, 1 pound of fish should cost between 1/3 pound of fruit and 3 pounds of fruit. Anywhere in there, 1 or more of them are happier, depending on the SKU. Likewise for fruit, Jack says, look, for 1 item of fruit, 1 pound of fruit, I give up 3 fish. I want to get it cheaper. If I'm going to buy fish, I want it cheaper. If I'm going to buy fruit, sorry, I want to pay less than 3 pounds of fish. Jill says, hey, for fruit, I'd like to get a better, I'd like to sell mine for a better deal than 1/3 pound of fish. So the price of fruit should be between 1/3 pound of fish and 3 pounds of fish. The price of fish should be between 1/3 pound of fruit and 3 pounds of fruit. And that's how you end up with relative prices, right? And so that's what we're looking at there. So anyway, this was the first office hour. I hope you guys enjoyed it. Next week I'll be back again to answer questions. Feel free to add your questions as you go. I'm also going to try to get someone to film me so that I can do some of these on a dry erase board, the big one, not the stupid little one that I carry around with me. But I'd like to be able to answer these questions a little more in depth, and then show you a little bit of the flavor of the way I do econ, because I realize for some of you, what I do is a lot different than the way the textbook looks sometimes. Textbook way works, the ways on the other videos work, my way works. The reality is there's lots of different ways to get the correct answer. It's up to you to figure out the way that it's going to help you learn the best. But I do realize that, especially when it comes to calculating these prices and doing comparative and absolute, well, comparative advantage in particular, it's hard. Now, the takeaway from that lesson is, if Jack has an absolute advantage in hunting fish and Jill has an absolute advantage in gathering fruit, if they just focus on what they are best at, if they're best at different things, then it's better for both of them. The next lesson for you guys is going to have to be, what happens if it's a trade relationship where Jack is better at hunting and fishing? Would they want to trade still? And the answer from economics is yes, they're still going to want to trade, but they're going to focus on what they have a comparative advantage in. And the comparative advantage is what they give up the least of. Someone's always better at doing something than someone else. And the way I think of that is the secretary and lawyer problem. The lawyer's better at typing papers and better at writing briefs, but clearly the secretary is okay at doing paper typing, but she doesn't know how to write briefs. So the lawyer hires the secretary to do typing for him, so that he can, or she, so that they can focus then on writing briefs, something the secretary can't do at all. And we'll talk about that more next time. So hopefully you enjoyed this. Have a good day. Any questions, feel free to call, feel free to email, feel free to text. Okay, I'm always here for you guys. I want to see you guys be successful, so hopefully this helps you out. Okay, bye.